I just got off the phone with Alphabet CFO Ruth Porat, who is now on the earnings call with CEO Sundar Pichai. She talked about hardware and AI and cloud and mobile and global, all of that buoying the results, and then mentioned that FX headwinds were probably the reason for some of the weakness that we're seeing. What do you see?
So thanks a lot for having me, Emily. I guess what I would start with is, look, I don't think it's a coincidence that you see a lot of these big cap technology and communication services companies missing on the revenue line. And I think a lot of that, frankly, is due to currency, where the dollar strengthened pretty significantly over the course of the quarter. And look, I think when you look at the miss, I mean, it was by a hair. And granted, it was a miss, but it was really a very, very small miss. And if you round, like a lot of people do, it really wasn't a miss. So the way we look at it is it was a good quarter. It's amazing to me also how very few people seem to also be focusing on the earnings beat, which was substantial, aided by a lower tax rate, for example. But overall, I think this was a solid quarter, above 20% growth again. And it seems like the trends are intact for the company to be successful for a number of quarters to come.
That said, there is concern about Amazon, distantly on Google and Facebook's tail when it comes to digital advertising. I asked Ruth Porat if she thinks of Amazon as a threat. She said, whenever new inventory is created that attracts consumer interest, advertisers will be interested. From what we're seeing, though, many dollars are coming from trade promotion and other budgets that haven't historically been spent on digital advertising. So we believe this expands the opportunity to tap into digital ad budgets. Bob, do you buy that?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense in terms of where they're trying to go, especially with all the things they're doing around YouTube and other content that they're bringing available. The other thing I think, and she mentioned it briefly, is some of their R&D costs were also higher. They've got a lot of investments in hardware. They've got a lot of investments in some of their YouTube services, the YouTube TV, for example. And I think those are interesting opportunities moving forward. At the end of the day, look, it's getting expensive to get to the right people and to get to these services out. Hence, these acquisition costs are going up, and that is an issue. But like the other gentleman said, it's essentially it hit it, but just barely missed. And the opportunities moving forward for them are still very strong. The concern, of course, is the regulatory environment. What's going to happen there? There's a lot of clouds hanging over Google/Alphabet, and I think those are concerns that people are thinking about, and we have to think about long term.
Let's talk about some of those clouds: privacy, fake news, being called to testify before Congress, not showing up. All of these things are very concerning, and I asked her if these privacy concerns were having an impact on users, having an impact on advertising, and she didn't really answer that question. I also asked about China and Google's reported plans to reignite its search engine in China. She told me at this point we continue to invest to help and support Chinese users from developing Android through mobile apps like Google Translate. As Sundar has said repeatedly, we are not close to launching a search product in China, and given the sheer scale of the market, we are focused on making sure we are doing the right things for the long term. Scott, what do you make of that?
So the way we've thought about this is, while it would be great in a number of respects, at least from an operational and financial perspective, for Google to re-enter China, the reality is, especially given the growing tensions between the two countries and their governments, we see that as a long shot, particularly over the near to intermediate term. It's actually one of the reasons why just over the last day or two we upgraded shares of Baidu, because we think that has been an overhang for that company and its stock, and we don't think that really is viable at this point for Google to re-enter China. I think they have far more priorities elsewhere, and I think just the political pressure and complexity and costs and risk of failure are so substantial. I think, look, continuing to invest in what's been working and things like Waymo, that's the way that that Google and Alphabet should be investing right now.
Do you think that Google should have not dropped Project Maven and continued its work with the DoD? I did ask Ruth Porat about that, and she talked about how they believe it's important to continue working with the military and laid out all of the other ways that they are doing so. But when you talk to Amazon, Jeff Bezos, and Microsoft Satya Nadella, they're saying, look, our country needs to be defended. So yes, we are going to work with the government and the Department of Defense.
Yeah, so my opinion on that is I think that they should have continued to talk with the government about that contract. I mean, you're talking, I think, about a $10 billion opportunity, which would have been tremendous for Google and its cloud business, which they've been investing in, but that would really possibly have been a game changer. And I'm not really clear on exactly what the opposition was in terms of moving forward with that contract. And you point out some very good rationales that other companies have articulated. So no, I think that actually was a mistake to walk away from that contract, particularly at this stage.
Bob, you know, Google's also got some business being done in Europe. They are facing that, you know, $5 billion record fine for antitrust issues, and she for the Android issues, I should say. She talked about how it remains to be seen how that will play out, but how much do you think that's going to hurt them? I
don't think it's going to hurt them very much financially, because the truth is there are very few alternatives, and ironically, in some ways, Google could actually make more money, because now the phone makers are going to have to pay Google for services they essentially gave away, because they have to be offered as an alternative. So in a weird way, I think it actually helped them. But long term, the financial impact, I think, is really small. And most of these controversies, I think, in the near term are not going to have a big influence on them. The bigger question are, as GDPR gets enforced, as the U.S. develops whatever equivalent it's going to create, as other countries around the world do this, how does that fundamentally impact the business model of what Google does around customized advertising and personal data tracking? Again, none of these things are going to impact right away, but certainly longer term, I think those are issues that have to be addressed.